Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, what's going on? Me and
Sean, do
my
you want to
keyboard.
make me co-host to
Oh,
help
actually, I
you?
will make a co-host just in case. Um, I don't know. Me and my keyboard are not getting on this week. When I press the buttons, it doesn't always work. And then I take it and I throw it, which of course doesn't mean it likes me even more, no? But no, yeah.
That is not going to help.
But then it starts working for a while. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Hello, Robin. I hope and trust you are well. Let's just see. How are we all? We're ready to pack up, and I don't know what we do. Of course, in our business, nobody can really, because somewhere in the holidays they put a month in. Month ends are so inconveniently placed, and it's far too regular. But no, yeah. You're excited for the last session. I just said to Elise, Robin, that my head feels like it's spinning because I start off because I decided we've talked so much about the 40 to 80 business day letter, and I may as well start there. We've spoken so much about the renewal and the 40 to 80 business day letter, and then I realized that I hadn't documented the process properly. And I had a chat with Ishmael because I realized the 40 to 80 business day letter is a requirement, but renewal isn't always a requirement. And we bundle it together. And I think that's where part of the problem comes. So I've spent the last few days pulling it apart. And I ended up with quite a juicy checklist, I must admit. But you do it, and then it all looks right, and you think you've done it wonderfully, and then you start going through the logic again, and then you realize, I don't know what was going on with my head. So I actually realized when I went through the training, when I was talking to somebody this week, we started our year with renewals. When we were talking about the whole thing, that if you don't document it, then you can end up with a short notice and all of that sort of stuff. And now we're ending up with, I think it's the third version now that I've updated this year. And Elise, I see you put your camera off, but I was going to say good morning and welcome. And at least one of the updates was as a result of you and me having a conversation about making sure people aren't in breach, etc., etc. And so that's one of the reasons I asked you to join, because we're going to be talking about the whole breach situation. Um, and let's be honest, it's often the landlords that'll be like, no, but I'm too scared not to have rent. I'm too scared not to have rent. Um, so good morning, Elise, before I talk too much.
Morning, Sean. Thank you very much for inviting me for today's session. I always love these sessions with you, and I know even from all our conversations, are ever forever learning something new. So it's always great.
Well, I like to keep things up to date. And you I think called me at one stage and at time and said, Sean, why do people renew when somebody's in breach? And I think you'd had a situation that had happened where, you always get called in when life is sad, and people aren't talking. We're not friends anymore. And so we have to get somebody in like you that can have a friendly but firm, I almost said face, and I'm trying to do with your face, by the way. Uh, and I thought about it, and so I always say that what we learn, we've got to implement, and we've got to update the processes. So that's something I'm going to go through today. What, from your perspective, for those of you that don't know Elise, goeiemôre Sorina, good morning everybody, Dumela, Molo, how's it brew? That's for the Durban people. They talk like that. But no, yeah. Um, Talking about the renewal process and the breach part, I'm gonna start the process now. And actually, this is the only slide we've got, ladies and gentlemen, because I thought what I'd do is today I'm going to focus on the process documentation that I've put together for us. I said, no, what did I do now? I thought
You unshared your screen.
Yes, I know, and I wasn't meaning to do that. I meant to end my presentation, but to still share the screen. Hey, boy, this time of year we get, oh, no, no, that's now Zoom. Hey, yeah, 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 yeah. When I get in my car, I get in my car. Ne? There we
Well,
are. We're
just
going
to let you
to
know as well, Ishmael has also joined us. He's also in the room.
Ishmael, good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Sometimes Ishmael's just a
Sorry, I had
voyeur.
some issues with my email trying to log in this morning. I did message Sean, but he didn't respond. I don't think he likes me that much on this early in the morning.
Well, I'm telling you, I just said to you, Liz, my head's spinning from going through this process documentation. Um, I advertised for 2 hours today, but really the focus is going through the process documentation. And at the risk, ladies and gentlemen, I did call Ishmael yesterday to check one thing with him so that I didn't say something and then he chirps in and makes a fool of me. But as we go through, I'm going to ask Yorni Lisa's opinions. I'm not going to try and fill the 2 hours because I know everybody's got lots of things to do. I really just want to go through the process and possibly the catching points. Um, and what I've done, Ishmael, and we had a chat about this, is I've pulled the 40 to 80 business day notice apart from the renewal. Because what I realized is, and you and Elise can help me if I'm wrong, is 40 to 80 business days notice is compulsory. Okay? As long as section 14 of the CPA and all that goodness now is compulsory. And and it is actually the instigating point for the fork in the road. Once we've sent that out, or when we send that out, we're essentially telling people what their options are, and we're saying to them, what do you want to do? And only if they want to renew do we go down the renewal route. Then it comes to the documenting, etc. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes, that
Yeah.
that makes sense. Because as you said now, Sean, that's the fork in the road. Remember, when the lease is coming to an end, cancel this. When the lease is coming to an end, when the termination date is looming, then it's not the option of the tenant whether they want to renew. It's the option of the landlord whether they want to offer a renewal. That's what your 40 to 80-day letter is. So on the one hand, the landlord might be saying, I don't want a tenant any longer. The lease is ending at the 1st of, or the 30th of November, or whatever date it may be. And then your 40 to 80-day notice is your lease is coming to an end. There will be no renewal. Thank you very much. We'll see you
Yes.
at the inspection. That's it.
And
It's done.
and
No
to
further
clarify,
documents.
as we go through, we'll clarify some of those things. So firstly, I suppose I've called this in my checklist, I have this thing called best practice guidelines. I used to call it company
Hmm.
policies. So this is what I believe to be the best practice. And it is a bit OTT. I totally understand that. But
Hmm.
part of the whole process in my mind is that we are showing the landlord how complicated our job is. And we're making them think, oh, shucks, I can't do this alone. Oh, shucks, I'd never
Hmm.
think of this. And so that's why I've sort of made it like that. So I suppose the first important point is that fixed term leases, which is what we're talking about today, because other leases don't come to an end. Fixed term leases have a start date and an end date, and they die a natural death on the end date, unless they are revived in one way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
So the default position is the lease is going to end. The
Hmm.
the next part, and we're focusing on the 40 to 80 business day letter here, which is under section 14 of the CPA, and I'm not going to worry about that. We're just going to assume that we're talking about leases that fall under that.
Yeah.
The 40 to 80 business day letter needs to be sent out every single time. And that's where things fall sometimes, and I know why things fall because we've got 1,001 things we've got to do. Things fall, but it can cause problems later. The one thing I did want to ask you, legal people, is I know that if you don't send it, you're in breach of the CPA. But can they fine you
Hmm.
or something like that? This whole breach thing?
Can they
Ishmael?
fine you? Sean, you have the best questions.
Well, I'm just thinking, okay, so you're in breach of the CPA, but what's the consequence?
Okay, the consequences are let's think that one through. It's a bit late in the year for this much plain work, but let's see what we can do about it. If there is a complaint against you to the Consumer Tribunal, then
Mm,
you can be sanctioned, yes, because you have to comply with the tribunal. I don't want to say you will be fined. I don't want to put a figure to the fine either, because I will have to check the regulations on that. Because again, we've never seen this happen, because
yeah,
it's unlikely that a tenant has or will lodge a complaint with the Consumer Tribunal for this, because 99% of your complaints are going to go to the Rental Housing Tribunal. They are going to look at the CPA as well and say, well, you didn't do what you were supposed to. Therefore, the lease is either going to be considered terminated, which you didn't want to terminate, or considered not terminated, which you did want to terminate. And that's sort of where the danger lies. It lies in the compliance, and the agent then having to answer to the landlord as to why the situation the landlord wants is no longer enforceable. And that's
yeah.
that's the danger. I mean, and again, that's me putting 20 seconds of thought into it on your
Well,
very, very quick firing question. But I think, Elise, maybe
sorry.
you also have something on
My
that.
thoughts are, I'll tell you how I think of it and what I've realized, which is why we spend so much time on renewals, etc., is there's no clarity.
Hmm.
People have different ideas. People think it's going to convert to a month to month because of lease
Hmm.
clauses and the CPA, that funny thing in the CPA, but it only actually converts once the lease has expired if the person is still there. And that's what people don't understand. So to me, the biggest thing is here
Hmm.
is that everybody's on the same page. They know it's ending, or they know the default
Hmm.
is ending. You don't realize that always.
So, Sean, we actually had an incident
Correct.
where we had a problem when the letter was not sent. And I think the best thing that happened there, so the agency didn't send the letter. And then on the termination date, they said to the tenant, listen, I'm coming to collect the keys. And the tenant said, no, I told you I want to renew. I want to stay on in the property. So, and your lease agreement is saying it's proceeding on a month-to-month basis. So you never told me the lease agreement. You
Hmm.
do not have the intention of renewing. So I assume we are all happy because nothing is, except now for 2 days before and you want the keys. There was nothing showing to me that you actually want to terminate or it's coming to an end. In that instance, we
Hmm.
had to wait for it to go over to a month-to-month basis, and then only could we give a month's notice in terms of the lease. And that was the biggest predicament, saying, listen, we cannot recall it because your behavior didn't show that you actually want the lease agreement to come to an end. You actually created the impression it's fine, it can continue on a month-to-month basis, especially with some of the wording in the lease agreements. It
Yeah.
always creates the impression it's
Hmm.
automatically going to go on a month to month, and it's easier for the tenant to actually rely on that.
You've said something. Well, of course, you've said something important. You're lawyers. Now, you say lots of important things. But when you say that, this thing about it automatically converts is, and I know that's how I used to work. Oh, no, but it converts. It converts, it converts. But you just said something so right in that it converts on the expiration. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't give the notice, the calendar month's notice before it converts, because it's actually a fixed term coming to an end on it's November now, the 30th of November. The 30th of November has got to finish and click into the 1st of December, and only then are you in a month to month, and only then can you give the calendar month's notice. And then it means you can only cancel it for the end of January, because a calendar month is a full month.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
and that's where the problem is, because
Hmm.
I mean, if you re-tenanting and all those things, yes, you're going to call people, you're going to say, I want to take kickies, and people are going to get a warning. But if they're not going to be re-tenanting, because let's say the landlord's got his son or his daughter or somebody moving in, and we haven't clarified, and I think that's the biggest issue here. We haven't clarified. Then people, some people will believe it's going to end. And the situation that I've come across quite a lot with our members is that they'll call me and say, Sean, the tenant just told me that he's leaving and asked me when am I going to arrange the exit inspection. And so it's a week away from month end. Can I hold them liable for next month's rent? And this is the thing you and I went through with a 45-minute conversation, Ishmael. And I remember it was
mm,
October 2023. It was a highlight of my life that we had this long conversation. And the problem is, no, it's ending. They're entitled to leave, and no, you can't hold them liable. And that's why we need this clarity. And the 40 to 80 business day notice actually tells you, is there a fork or is there a dead end? Is it a
mm,
cul-de-sac or
mm.
is it a circle with two forks? I don't know. You know this, when you say the fork, if you say it fast, it's ugly, no? But no, yeah, I'm trying so nicely to articulate. Because to me, that's the biggest concern here. The lack of clarity people have in their
Correct.
minds.
Remember, the thing that we have to keep in mind, especially in situations like this, is there's two major factors that I always have to stress in situations like this. The first one is we don't really have the luxury of getting it wrong. Because again, if the landlord wants the tenant out and nothing is done, no notice is sent, everyone just sits back and thinks, well, the lease is going to end.
Mm.
The lease is going to end, the tenant's going to leave. But as in Elise's situation, the tenant's thinking, well, I don't want, I'd like to stay here, and they're not asking me to leave, so I'm going to stay. When that time comes, if that tenant doesn't leave, even a compliant tenant needs to be given a full calendar month's notice, which means notice given in December is for the end of January. So, and that's for a lease ending in November.
Mm.
So your landlord is now sitting with a tenant for 2 months that they didn't want.
Mm.
If it's a non-compliant tenant, then Expello needs to get hold of me and I need to get hold of the court and the court needs to get hold of the sheriff. And then your 2 months suddenly is looking like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6 months,
But in
depending on
that
the
case,
process
you
that we
still
need to
need to give
follow.
the notice.
So
I mean, you're still going to put on, sorry, on
this
terms or
note,
something.
yes, I'm saying to the
Oops.
tenant, be out at the end of January. A
Mm.
compliant tenant leaves, a non-compliant tenant doesn't leave, and now we need to evict.
Yes.
Evictions are not quick. They take time. Elise and I know this. We work on this every day. These things take time. And then you have agents and landlords that are getting frustrated because of what the process and the system is. So that's the one thing. If you get it wrong, it has a potential of taking a lot of time. The other thing is the 40 to 80-day notice is the responsibility of the landlord. It's not for the tenant at any time prior to receiving that notice. There's no responsibility on the tenant to come forward and say, I would like to renew. May I please have a further 12, 24, 6, whatever many months? There's no responsibility. The responsibility sits with the supplier, which is the landlord and therefore the agent, saying, would you like to? Or there will be no renewal, please leave. We have to
And
look at
that
where the
leads us
responsibility
nicely
lies.
into the point I highlighted. Maybe that's what gave you the idea of where I was going there. um, we need to get the landlord's instructions first
Hmm,
because the whole thing is, as you say, the CPA says the supplier must contact the consumer 40 to 80 business days prior to the end of the lease and tell them blah, 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 amongst other things, when their lease is ending. So
hmm,
the supplier is the landlord in our case. So, people will say to me, for example, oh no, I called the tenant and they're happy to stay on, so I don't need to do anything. And I called the landlord and it's fine. But the problem is, and this is a situation we have faced, they say that verbally, but
hmm.
there's nothing documented. Then next week they look on the internet and they say, oh, there's a lacquer house there by the sea. Oh, and it's half the price of ours. Ach, we're going to leave. And then they up and they leave, and you can do nothing about it because you didn't give them their options and their consequences. And that's where it's when that happens. It's
Hmm.
when that happens that that the agent is made a fool of, to be honest. And it's an expensive exercise because the landlord's out of pocket at least 1 month.
Sean,
Correct.
I would,
Yeah, sorry.
when obtaining the instructions from the landlord, and I think this is one thing that is important, but I do want, and I, because I know you train all the people in your membership this way, is that they actually should have the conversation with the landlords, because we are still seeing people renewing lease agreements where tenants has been defaulting. And we're seeing it's on the next phase, this 40 to 80-day letter. I see they send it to the landlord saying, it's time to renew, we're proceeding renewing. And I actually go to the agents and say, people, why did you not have the conversation with the landlord to say, what's the options?
Yes.
So, although, yeah, when you have to get the instructions from your landlord, I think the agents should really take the time and have a conversation with the landlord, not just an email. Because, in some instances, they go, okay, but they've been defaulting. I don't per se want to enter into a fixed term, but I don't want them to vacate. Let it
Going to be
run for a
so
couple.
impressed by what I came up with,
Okay,
because
please go
I,
for
I,
it.
I touched on that. And I must admit, you start off and you think, oh, well, we're going to do a 40 to 80 business day letter checklist. And in the end, it ends up being 3 pages long. Because you get to this and then you realize, but wait, I can't just do a 40 to 80 business day letter. And the breach is the one thing. So I just want to say, I just want to run through these and then we're going to get into the process. Any offer has to be subject to FICA, because the bottom line is the law says we have to re-FICA. When I say subject to FICA, meaning we can only renew, we can only sign the document, we can only prepare your renewal once we have redone the FICA. And this is where we redo the terrorist financing and sanctions list, because, the Guptas might be able to stay there next month, if they're off the list now, or Mr. Matlala might have to move because he's on the list now, and all those sorts of things. So we've got to do that. We've got to do the adverse media check. We've got to do, I think we've actually got to do, and I was thinking about this, I think we've actually got to do an ID verification. I don't mean that I need to go and get their ID again. But I think it's one thing is we want to check them against Home Affairs, because we don't actually know if those people are still actually here. And when it comes to immigrants, we've got to check, are they still legally in the country? And we get to that whole thing, which will go on. So what I'll do is I'll fast forward here. So the question is, I have to go to the landlord first. And then I realize, but going to the landlord and saying what you want to do, and then going and saying, oh, but they're in breach, doesn't make any sense. So when I went and put this together, we started off with a breach. So here it's about, does section 14 of the CPA apply, et cetera, et cetera. If it does, then of course you've got to follow this process, and it's got to be 40 to 80 business day, blah, 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 blah. If it doesn't, you don't have to do the 40 to 80. But I think it's just simple actually to continue, because whether it's CPA or whether it's not CPA, the bottom line is the lease is most coming to an end. But I know if it's not CPA, you can probably contract some or other funny thing about no 40 to 80s. But let's not go there. Let's just pretend. Let's stick to the one. So the
Wait,
very
Sean,
first question,
before you go on, let's actually touch on that. Let's actually touch on that just to create a bit of clarity.
yes,
If the CPA applies, you've got to do it. You've got to send the letter 40 to 80 days. Right? There's no question it has to happen. If the CPA doesn't apply, you don't have to send a letter within the 40 to 80-day period. But it's best practice, as you are always, going on about, which is 100% correct. It's best
you make
practice
me sound so
to
boring.
still have this conversation, to still send out a notice to say, this is what the landlord wants. So for agents to put this within their normal 40 to 80-day period so that they're not missing anything, absolutely nothing wrong. Because there's nothing in the lease saying it cannot be done within a 40 to 80-day period. Or there's nothing in the CPA saying if the CPA doesn't apply, you may not send this type of notice. It's not a double negative on that. So I'm saying do it. Whether the
The
CPA
lease is
applies
still
or
going to
not,
end.
send the notice
I
and
mean, the point
start the
is the lease is still
conversation
going to
there.
end. You're still going
Exactly.
to have a lack of clarity. So you're giving guidance, you're giving options. So when it
100%.
comes to
So
that
I'm
point
saying
of asking,
always send the notice.
yes,
Always
the
send the
only thing is
notice.
take out all the references to the CPA. If the CPA doesn't
Yes.
apply, but you look like a fool. That's about what it's about. So the very first question I
Yeah.
had was, are the tenants in breach? And the most common breach that we talk about is arrears. But of course, it can be all sorts of breaches. It can be that they have been making noise for more than 21 days. It can be that they keep on parking on the wrong car park. People kill you for a car park where I live. It can be anything. The point is, do I have a problem tenant? That's really what we're saying here. And then I realized, but you can't then go to the landlord and say, what you want to do? Oh, you'd like to renew. Okie dokie, I will now put something together for you. And then you come back and you say, your tenant's in breach, so we shouldn't do it. You must going to look stupid. So we've got to actually first check the breach. And then if they've in breach, then I've got a formal letter here, but I suggest you have a conversation with your landlord about it and then just document with a formal thing so that you are covered if something gets stuck somewhere, because you know how difficult people are. So what I did is I created one for when the tenant is in breach and when the tenant is not in breach to go to the landlord. So we're saying to the landlord and we're showing our value. That's the other thing. You know how many agents contact me at the end of the lease period and say, Sean, they want to manage themselves now. What can I do? The problem is by the time somebody decides that, it means they don't see value in what you're doing. So one nice thing about this is that we're starting this 3 months before the end. Other people aren't thinking about the end yet and what's going to happen. And so this is where I call it, you scare them, that they think, oh, shucks, I can't live without Sean. How must I know all of these things? And so I've written it with that in mind as well. So let's have a look at where the tenant's in breach. And we're not going to go through every single thing, but I do want to go through that one. Ish, I got myself so confused with my Pro Power packs here that, hey, ball, there we got a 40 to 80 business days, 601A. This is where they're in breach, where we go to the landlord, because we need to start there because the landlord has to do it, so we need to do it on the landlord's behalf. So I want to make that clear. And going to the landlord and then the tenants and someone not sending a letter is not a good idea because what we've spoken. So in terms of the section 14, a notice must be sent to the tenant. I'm waking the landlord up that they think, oh, what value now? It's a legal requirement and must contain specific information. Of course, I haven't given them all the answers because I don't want to tell them how to write it. The upcoming lease expiry, the tenant's available options, the terms and conditions on which they may renew, and a request for the tenant to confirm their preference, renewal, or vacating. Then I go on to say, fortunate is part of our service offering. And this is one thing, Ishmael, I remember, I remember your words. I remember earlier this year, we were in a training and we were talking about this, and you made it very clear. 40 to 80 business day notice is not part of the renewal process. It is part of the lease management process. And that's something it's part of the lease management. So we need to put this in our mandate. We need to do all these things. So that's why I'm starting now. Fortunately, issuing this is part of our service offering. We send it on your behalf once we receive your instructions. Then we go on to say, as part of this process, we have reviewed the tenant's current standing. Aren't you impressed, Elise? And note the following breaches. Blah, 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 blah. ChatGPT gave me these ideas. Given these issues, we strongly recommend not renewing the lease when it expires. Then I go on to say, renewing a tenant who is currently in breach, because I know what happens now. I know from practice, the landlord's like, no, I feel sorry for them. No, but if I let them go, and I've got somebody here in Fishhook now, he wants to sell his house, he wants to do all these things. I won't put him in touch with an agent. I refuse to give him the number because I said, you can't sort your head out. When you're serious, you come talk. I'm not wasting agents' time. Because he's got a tenant that was 100,000 in arrears. And I'm like, why don't you get rid of them? Seriously. Oh no, but Sean, I'm scared they break my house. I'm scared they could do damage. I'm like, none of the damage is going to be 100,000. I mean, seriously. But this is where the illogical comes in, and this is where you've got to talk to them. Renewing a tenant who's currently in breach exposes you to several risks: increased or continued arrears, worsening payment behavior, potential damage to the property, because I don't know actually what the breach is. I'm just making up some ideas. Increased administrative and legal intervention. And you don't have expel, ne? Difficulty enforcing lease obligations during a renewed fixed term. And this is the big thing. You are committing yourself to another 12 months of pain. Why do you want to do it? And delays in securing a more reliable tenant. For these reasons, renewing a fixed term with a tenant currently in breach is generally not advisable. You can make this harsher if you want. To proceed correctly, please confirm which option you prefer. And I've given them option 1, not to renew. Option 2, explore renewal despite the breach. Because I do come at one point and say, we won't be able to help you manage. That's the next phase of this process. Because I'm thinking, maybe then, if they don't understand what I'm saying now, maybe then they'll say, hey, shucks, these agents, they don't walk away from money for nothing. They must be really serious about that. So I put that step in just now. Not to renew. We will prepare and issue the CPA required 40 to 80 business day notice, informing the tenant the lease will end. We can also discuss re-tenanting options or any alternative plans you may prefer. That's option 1. Option 2. If you still wish to consider a renewal, please confirm in writing and we will proceed accordingly, subject to update. I mean, this sounds a bit silly, but if they want to be silly, I'm going to be silly back. Subject to updated screening, affordability checks, and FICA compliance. I mean, I must know can't afford. Please note that renewing the lease, I go on and on a bit here, but at least it comes back, and that's why I just jumped to this because you brought it up. Please note that renewing
Thank you,
the
Sean.
lease under these circumstances may result in increased arrears, continued or escalating breaches, financial loss, or future enforcement difficulties. Me and ChatGPT were having big fights this week. That helps me write things like this. By choosing to explore renewal, you acknowledge, and I put this very clearly, because what happens when we end up somewhere and they go to Ishmael and complain about me, I tell Ishmael, look, this is what I sent them. I've got my process documented. They can't, because people must forget things. Actually, they just don't understand. I can't say they forget. You acknowledge that you have been advised of these risks and that we cannot be held liable for any such consequences. I'm intense. I'm OTT here. But people don't want to listen to us. They want to pay an expert, but then they want to tell you what to do. Hi, boy, I'm not a PA. Should you opt for a renewal despite the current breach, I will also need to seek instruction from our management on whether we will be able to continue with the current management service offering. And I will revert to you in this regard. And then we ask them, please tell me option 1 or option 2. Elise, does that address what you were talking about?
It does, Sean. I'm very curious, and I hope you're not going to hit me over the head. Luckily, I'm not in Cape Town. But do you think it should make sense to maybe add an option to say that, because I mean, we have seen people breach a lease agreement. They are keeping to the agreements, but it's in a stance that you don't really want to enter into a new fixed term. Shouldn't an option be made available? And I think this is where education and also guidance to your agents to say, listen, we are not going to renew it for a fixed term, but allow it to go on a month-to-month basis for a period of 4 months before we renew for a fixed term.
Elise,
Is that
you
something
are
that's going to
leading me where we are going. And I can't pretend that I can tell you I've thought this through. So what we're doing, we send in this intention email. And probably the most important one is when the tenant is in breach, because the other one is a lot simpler, obviously.
Yeah.
Then we ask the landlord, what do they want to do? Tell us option 1 or option 2. Actually, the option that no, we say not renew it. So that's the option 1, and option 2 is if you want to. That's why I've worded it funny. If you want to, despite our advice. So now they come back to us, and I've got, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that say, but nobody ever gets back to me. I've written, these are reminders. Okay, there's a series of 3 reminders that get harsher as you go along. But this is because we need this answer because we're working under time pressure. If the landlord, then we go to here, Elise, if the landlord chooses option 1 not to renew, then we go to the send the 40 to 80 business day notice letter. If the landlord chooses explore renewal, and I haven't found a better word to explain this. I actually don't even want to put it in this letter, but I've got to put it in this letter. We can take it out of this letter maybe, but then we say proceed to step 5. Elise, step 5 is where you're going to love me even more. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry, it's not just a me and Elise and Ishmael thing. Is everybody getting some cool ideas here? Sorry, it's almost like I'm forgetting there's a family here. Now, if they choose option 2, in other words, despite what you've told them, they don't want to. And obviously you adapt this to your circumstances because you also must have a feeling. Confirm whether we are in agreement with the landlord's renewal or non-renewal intention. Yes, we are aligned. So that we've told the landlord we don't think you should renew. The landlord has opted not to renew. We're going to the 40 to 80 business day later. All cool bananas. No, we are not aligned. For example, the tenant is in breach, but the landlord wants to renew. Hey, at least we go to step 3. I mean, step 6. You see how all the steps came in here because I started this thing, no? If we're not aligned with the landlord's intention because the tenant is in breach, but the landlord still wishes to renew, we present them with, we call it a risk managed alternative. This is where ChatGPT helps. It thinks up funny words like this. We go to 603. So now all we do is we go, oopsie, where's my dinghy? You see, Liz, I pre-prepared this in advance. It's like a cooking show, no? I
Well,
pre-prepared it in the oven.
people are going to think that we rehearsed this, but
No, I
this is just
didn't.
how our
I called
conversations go.
Ishmael. I did consult with Ishmael briefly yesterday about something I was going to say today, and I thought, oh, if I say that and he tells me I'm wrong, I'm going to look like a fool and we're going to end very quickly, no? But that
Yeah,
part
we
is
just want to confirm we don't have a script. We're not working off a script.
no, except that you're not allowed to say I'm wrong when we get to step number 12.
Okay.
Because I consulted with you yesterday. Now, month-to-month extension proposal and 6-month review is what I've come up with. We understand from your response that you would prefer to extend the lease with the current tenant despite the existing breaches or concerns. Of course, you changed this, man. While we fully appreciate your desire to avoid vacancy, now really this depends. I've made it for the case where we really do not want to go through another 12 months like the last 12 months. That's the way I've written it, but you can change it. While we fully appreciate your desire to avoid vacancy, you're avoiding vacancy, but of course, you're not avoiding arrears now. That's the nice thing. It's like having a security guard in your house. They're costing you money and they maybe just, they're there so nobody's going to break in. Our professional opinion is that entering into a new fixed term extension would expose you to unnecessary financial and legal risk. You see, I just write words. Below are the key considerations supporting our recommendations. So what we explain here, the risk of entering into a new fixed term lease and our recommended option, which is your risk managed month-to-month extension. So what are the risks of a new fixed term? Essentially what it's saying here is, if you enter into a new fixed term and the problem does not resolve or the problem gets worse, you've got to do a 20 business days notice. You've got to then do your cancellation letter. You're 2 months down the line, you're 2 months worse off. And you know what happens then? Because I know it's happened to me where a client will call me and say, Sean, I just saw a new car on the driveway. Now I want to do something. You know, the last 5 months they've said, no, 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 no. And then they're like, can we do it quickly? And then they say, can you tell the courts it's urgent? And I'm like, the lawyer hasn't even written the letter yet, Poppy. It's going to take 10 days. That's when you say, but you must put that money into the lawyer's account and they're going to do something. Sorry, I'm not being rude, but lawyers don't do anything without money. And it's fine. And then they call me the next day. They say, so how far are we? I'm like, your money hasn't even cleared. It's going to take 10 days to get the document, and then I've got to go to the police and attest to it and all that chutas. No, but tell them it's urgent. And that's when these days I send them to Ishmael because I got tired of explaining to people courts don't do urgency. But now that we have all these commissions, you can well see they don't do urgency. Oh, we're dealing with a very complicated stuff. Oh, it's 11 o'clock time for tea. We'll be back at 1:15. Oh, it's 1 o'clock time for lunch. Nothing about urgent. Oh, it's 4 o'clock. We've got to go home.
Story of my life, Sean. Story of my life.
Yeah, but this is the point. People don't understand. And maybe this is where you two can explain, yeah. So do you like my fixed term lease option and why we don't do it? This is what I'm explaining. And then, sorry, just to finish this in, I'll let you two comment. Our recommended option is our risk managed month to month. To protect your interests while giving the tenant a final opportunity to improve, we recommend a risk management month extension, supported by a structured review process. Does this not sound fancy? Who's going to leave you and try and do this themselves, this risk managed structured review process? The tenant is offered a month-to-month renewal rather than entering into a fixed term. A formal review is scheduled in 6 months or whatever months you want to make it. I just like that because if the tenant corrects, as you say, Elise, people have problems. Yeah? I mean, shame. I was also put on debt review last month by some other silly person who never sent me an invoice. But anyhow, it's all clear. So I know that people have these things happen. So yes, or people that work for political parties and things. I know these things happen. You just don't get paid. Or even, yeah. So a formal review is scheduled, so then we can fix things. So it's almost like a motivation. It's a carrot, not a stick. If the, oops, let me find my thing. You know, I poor man, I'm telling you, I've got to find the right one again now. 603. There we are. If the tenant has remedied all the breaches and demonstrated improved conduct, we can assist in negotiating a new fixed term. If the tenant has not improved, you retain the ability to terminate with 1 calendar month's notice without needing to invoke the CPA's breach procedure, which we've explained up there, which allows you to act swiftly and avoid prolonged exposure to risk. In other words, get rid of them, but we just put it nicely. So, Elise, and then this offer approaches, it offers you maximum flexibility, was substantially reducing your long-term financial and legal exposure. And then they've got option 1 and option 2. Does this address what you were talking about, Elise?
Yeah, I like the fact that you do give them an alternative option and it is explained because we sometimes forget owners don't know these type of things. They think it's clean cut. They think it's either one way or the other. And I think it's always important to give them all the facts, all the pros, all the cons, give them always the agent's opinion, and then they have to make the choice. But we can't expect landlords to make educated choices if we don't give them all the information. So
Well,
that's the first thing I want to add.
You employ a professional for a professional opinion. And I've got to give it to you whether, often when agents call me, I have this thing about, sorry, I'm going to have to tell you something you don't want to hear. But unfortunately, I have to be honest. I put my therapeutic voice on it. But I agree. And I like the fact that you can have this discussion, but you can follow up with an email. Because later on, when something goes wrong, they forget the conversation.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And the other thing, what I like about your letters is, especially with that letter that you send to the landlord with option 1 and 2, you can actually upload this if you're an agency to one of these like DocuSigns or sign requests. And because they can clearly reply with a 1 and a 2. And for the week, you can set it that they can get a reminder every day. You don't have to do anything. So purely setting it up, sending it out to the landlord, the system gives them reminders every day until they sign it. I think it really helps the process and it opens their hands and makes them look very professional.
I mean, all the things that I've got here in square brackets are essentially where you can just put in shortcodes if you're using something like a DocuSign or saying, oh, WeConnect you also has that. Don't tell them I sent you, because when my company moved over after I left, they had over 100 templates that had to be moved over, and they were very angry with me. Someone called me and said, Sean, you caused problem. I'm like, hi, Bo, we just do things right. But anyhow, Ishmael, do you have any
But Sean,
comments?
sorry,
Oh,
before
sorry.
Ishmael say, I just want to say, and you know what big difference it makes? Just on my own property, the fact that I got a very professional letter from my agent telling me there's a renewal, what is the options, you're impressed immediately. I didn't go from, oh, I didn't hear from my agent for so long, I'm not going to buy them. I went, wow, they're on top of it. I will gladly renew their mandate. And I think people underestimate the value of these correspondence that agents send out.
Now, I agree, because it's also showing our value. And when somebody comes to you at the end of the lease and they call me and say, the landlord wants to cancel, then immediately in my head, and I'm sorry, I'm not being rude to people, is we've not shown value. They're thinking that that cost is not giving them a payback. But when you are doing, and I know this thing is OTT, but when you are doing this 3 months before, I think the chances that they're going to try and navigate this minefield is so much is reduced incredibly. Ishmael, do you have any comments on the approach?
Yeah, the only thing that I
Only positive.
want to bring up. No, of course. No, look, firstly, I'm fully in agreement with the process that's been set out. I think we just need to make a small distinction when we're speaking about a tenant that's in breach. There are two types of tenants. We're looking only at financial breach here. If you've got a tenant that's carrying an arrears, so in other words, they've got 1 or 2 months outstanding, but they are currently up to date with the current, let's say the last 3 months worth of rent has been paid, but there's still an arrear amount outstanding. Then I would say, yes, definitely maybe offer them a month to month because they had some issue in the past, some maybe a medical issue, or they were retained for 2 months, whatever the case may be. But as soon as they were able to pay, they then continued paying and they just sort of carrying this arrears. So we can go into some sort of a management process to settle that. That's different to a tenant that is 3 or 4 months in arrears and currently still not paying when it comes time to renewal.
Mm.
Because that tenant, that one's trouble. Because never mind the fact that they haven't paid for, let's say, 3 months, you do the renewal, first month of the renewal, they're probably not going to pay. Second month, third month. So your 3 or 4 months starts to escalate, 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 escalate. And one of the big risks there is to the agent because the agent's commission is coming from the rental. So if your landlord has convinced you to do a renewal with a non-paying tenant, all you're doing is committing yourself to another 12 months of management for no money. So
Yeah.
go put your time and your energy into a property you know you're going to not get paid on versus the ones that you could be getting paid on. So I think just let's make that distinction and let's guide our landlords that if they do want that renewal, even though the tenant is not currently paying, then there needs to be a process that the agent gets paid monthly directly from the landlord for that
Actually,
management.
yes.
Yeah, because
Very
remember
Yes,
good.
I've
your
actually
I
got
commission,
love it.
yes, you are entitled to your commission from the rental, but your commission is actually coming from the landlord, not coming from the tenant. So if the tenant's not paying, the agent should still be getting paid.
I see Robin's just said we're becoming classified almost as paralegals. The other day when I was on a webinar with a compliance consultant who happens to work in the real estate field, she referred to our job, whether you're sales or whether you're rentals, as
Hmm.
almost like a paralegal because we do sort of breach things, and we don't have that much knowledge. We have enough sometimes just to be scary. But coming to what you just said, what I've done here, and maybe I've taken the approach that I would take if they want to continue with a fixed term in this particular case, okay, um, despite what I've said, then I've said we will not be able to continue managing it under the fixed term. But we're happy to document the renewal for you at a fee of 4% of the contract value. There are times when I've done this where I am going to walk away. Because in the end, as you say, Ishmael, I am working for free. This is not about being a people pleaser. This is about money. This is about I always say I love my job, but I don't love it so much I'm going to do it for free. This body is a temple, it needs offerings, no? No, we can't live on love alone or bread alone or whatever the goodness is. So I've actually taken that approach here. Where and if it's one of those situations where seriously, I've pulled all my hair out in the last 12 months, I've got nothing left to pull out, I am quitting. Then seriously, this is the approach I go. Yes, I can help you document it's going to be 4%, but after that, I'm going to wave you goodbye and be so lucky I've missed out on this. And I think sometimes we have to take this approach. And that's why I worked in the thing about management approval in one of the letters. Because one way to say is, I'm sorry, management won't approve. It's easier, I'm sorry, I'm the messenger. No, but management won't approve. Because the bottom line is, the reality is, we're stuck between hell and a hot place sometimes.
Hmm.
The landlord wants one thing. We know it's not the right thing, but we cannot take the decisions. We, however, bear the consequences. And the consequence is working. Robin, you would ask that. Now, what happens when you management? You just tell them my business partners won't allow me. You'd think up a word.
Oh, no, no, Sean, I've got a better one for Robin
Oh,
than
wait,
this one.
Ishmael.
I've seen this one 1,000 times, even though I didn't know it was going out. We've spoken to our lawyer, and our lawyer said we can't do it. So just blame
Fantastic.
us.
We've sought legal advice, and the risk to our reputation is too high.
There we go. I'll take the
Like
blame.
that.
I don't mind.
The compliance officer. Yeah, truly sorry. The situation with Robin is she's the only person. So she's the compliance officer. She's everything. So you can say you've spoken to an expert, Robin. You give me a call and I'll sit with you and I'll put my therapeutic voice on and tell you don't you yeah. But you're better off getting business that's going to pay you. And that's less work because this is another thing. Often when we're stuck in these situations, I just want to put it out there, we're limiting our growth. because it's these sorts of ones that take as much work as three other ones. So sometimes it's good to say, cast it aside and let's earn three times as much. So, so we've did that. So we've got that now. So we're busy doing all of that. If we're not aligned with the landlord's intention, we do that. Then we do all these follow-ups. A lot of these things are follow-ups now. But you're right, Elise, we can put these on auto. And those things are irritating there because I had to do something once and they kept on sending every flipping day. And I thought, what's going on? And then I realized I automate the system, but they are irritating. You do something just to stop it. Then once we have got the landlord's response, we've received it and reviewed it. Option one, month-to-month extension, proceed to step 9. This is where we do current market appraisal, et cetera, because I think it shows our value again. Option 2, fixed term extension not recommended. We cannot continue to manage under unless manager approve. I've put that there for people that do have managers. You can change this. You can just say we're not going to, and you just say, my lawyer won't let me. My insurance won't let me because the risks are too high. They want to double my insurance. I don't know. I'm thinking of things, but it's nice to actually have something like you said, Ishmael, to have something in your head that you can just do it like that. You know, say, I need to go think about that one. And if the landlord decides not to renew, we go to step number 12, which is once again the 40 to 80 business day letter. So if they want to renew or whatever, because remember, we've dealt with, they're not all breaches. Some of them jumped immediately to number 8. So we just went a lot into the breaches. But I know that we discussed it a few times in the year, Elise. And when I thought about it, I thought, it seems so obvious when there's a problem. But I also know, you know, I've had people who say to me, no, but the landlord doesn't want to renew and the tenant does. Shame the landlord's not being nice. And I understand that people are often close to people, but in the end, we have to, I don't know, I always used to say, I'm a BITCH but I was born that way. And it's very easy for me to do that between 9 and 5. The problem is that I don't tell them I'm always like that. Eh? But anyhow, but we've got to just divorce ourselves from things. And I think this is where lawyers come. Oh, I'm shame, I'm not nothing personal. But it's a business transaction. It's a fact. And you've just got, and you guys say it so much to people, and the more you say it to people, the more you get used to it, that I've just got to give you the facts. You know?
Yeah, because
Then
also
they,
remember, if the
yeah,
landlord says, no, I don't want to renew, and the tenant really wants to renew because they love the place or it's close to work, schools, whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, we work for the landlord. We don't work for the tenant. We have a relationship with the tenant because we're managing them all the time, and all we're doing is paying the landlord. But we're paying the landlord their own money. It's their rental that comes in. We work for the landlord. We are the agent to the landlord. If the landlord says no lease, then there's no lease. And we have to accept that.
and that's one of the hard parts in our business is that as I was saying, all of these things we think, if only I didn't have somebody telling me I mustn't do it that way because I know what I'm doing. But that is the person that takes the decisions and that is the person that's paying me. And sometimes it's a frustration when people aren't on the same page. And this is why I think it's so important when you onboard new business to, from the beginning, show the way you want it to work. And it's, I'm the expert. This is what I am. I'm going to give you the best advice. You take the decisions, but I might not always be able to help you with them. Or, you know, when people call me and say, Sean, you must do this. And I say, but I can't do that. But you work for me. I know. It's the same way that I saw somebody shouting the other day at somebody telling the cops that they work for them. They pay the, this man that's having, oh, shame, you might be one of your clients, Ishmael. This man that's having a problem here, he's already gone from one complex because they kicked him out, and now he's in the next complex. And I don't know, but I'm not telling secret stuff. He's all over TikTok making a fool of himself, man. But anyhow, and the police have come. I don't know why they called the police now. And the police are there, and he's busy saying to them, "No, you can't tell me what to do. I pay your salary. I pay your salary." And you know, it's like, no wonder. I mean, and he thinks he's fancy on TikTok, make a fool of himself. But that's the
Okay,
thing that,
I think I'm going to try that one the next time I walk into court. I'm going to tell the judge, I pay your salary.
yes.
We'll see how that works out for
No,
me.
my matter, please, Ishmael.
No, but he's going on
Now
about,
you make sense.
I spend 30,000 a month on this rental. It's one of those. Anyhow, let me not get distracted, Shame. It's almost like Christmas. I'm having so much fun, eh? So then we go and we do what I call a pre-renewal rental assessment. I think it's very good to have this step so that we can say to them, this is where I think you should go with the rental. And I didn't suck it out of my thumb. Once again, we bring in value. We're showing value. Then
Sean,
we say,
sorry. And that is
sorry.
specifically important because some lease agreement says that the rent has to increase with 10%. And then it takes them out of the market. So at least if you go to your landlord and say, listen, I know the lease agreement says 10%, but we suggest only 6% to keep it within the market, then at least you have got something to back it up.
What I've got is, as per usual, I've got a template for this, which we're not going to go into, but it shows you we've done the property summary, the current rental, and the proposed terms for renewal. What that 10% is most the annual renewal, but that's most now for the current lease. So if we renew, it doesn't have to be that. That's what happens if people stay on or if you don't follow the due process. I always used to put 10%, and I'll tell you why. Because it has never been in the last few years actually 10%. So I used it when I'd go to the landlord and I'd say, I know it said 10%, here's the facts. Okay. And I give them the facts and I say, it's actually gone up by 7.5%. That's what I suggest because you also don't want vacancies. It's so hard to find people, all those sort of things depending on the market. And then when I write to the tenant and make the offer in the 40 to 80 business day letter, I'll write something like, your current lease says 10. I know it's a bit of BS. The current lease says 10%, but in acknowledgement of if you will commit to another 12 months, the landlord's prepared to make it 7.5%. So I think it's a good negotiating tool. Robin does the same. You see, Robin, great minds think alike. Yeah. So this is the assessment. You cut out whatever, but I think it shows because often this is where the argy-bargy is. No, I just read in the newspaper last week. Rents have gone up 15%. I want 30%. I have had people that come with 30% and silly things like that. But I'm making it based on facts. So we're divorcing the conversation. We're keeping it factual. I think that's important. So now we then submit a proposal to the landlord. And I know this sounds so fuzzy-wuzzy, but the point is I know these people never get back to us, and then we start doing a whole lot of following up now. So let's just have a look what is in the proposal. So we're now saying this is what we're proposing. These recommendations reflect current market conditions, blah, blah, blah. This is important. Standard requirements before any renewal can be finalized. Ishmael, we've spoken about this a lot. This is almost like a recap, like they do on TV. All the programs will have the recap of 2025. This is almost like a recap. Residency status verification. People don't think about that. And if you don't have a checklist, you're not going to think about that. So we need the landlord to know. Now, once again, the landlord's reading this and they're thinking, oh, can you imagine what trouble I'm going to get into if I didn't have Sean helping me? That sort of thing. Last week I almost referred something to you, remember, Ishmael, and I didn't follow up on it because I realized that you asked me and it was going to be trouble. This had to do something we're going to deal with this I haven't told you, Elise, in January. When somebody's selling a tenanted property, and I got this message from via another agent by WhatsApp. This person is desperate. They need a lawyer urgently. They've got to evict somebody. The property transferred on the 1st of December. It's the 7th of December. How can we get rid of them? And so I said, Ishmael, are you in the mood for business? And he said, yes. And I said, cool bananas, because they said they called a celebrity lawyer and the celebrity lawyer wasn't available. And I thought, well, that's a warning sign. But anyhow, I asked Ishmael. I didn't tell him about the celebrity lawyer. And so I contacted the person. I said, oh, you can contact so-and-so. And I got the voice note back, Ishmael, which Ishmael followed up with me the next day because he wasn't a celebrity lawyer who was so busy. And I sent in the voice note. I said, no, I got this voice note and I decided not to pursue it because the lady was saying, oh, I just found out they're illegally in the country, so I'm going to go to Home Affairs and I'm going to go to the police and report them. And sent a voicemail back and saying, you might not want to do that because your landlord might not look good in an orange jumpsuit. No. So I suggest that you give this to somebody and you speak to Ishmael before you report anybody anywhere because your landlord's contracted with her. So this brings me to this point. Aish, I'm so full of fun today. This brings me to this point. When you contract with somebody who's not legally in the country, this is close to orange, but not the right shade. You might end up in a onesie, in an orange onesie that doesn't have a bunny rabbit on it. This is something, Ishmael, we've spoken about a lot.
Hmm.
Now, I've had a number of people contact me close to the end, and you get to a practical situation. I don't know how Home Affairs works, but they'll say to me, no, but the tenant can only submit their application 1 week before it expires, which is in 3 months' time. It seems like they can't say, but my agent wants me to renew now for 12 months. Can we renew? Like you just go to a license to say your disc is lost now. Evidently, that's not how it works. So I don't know how to tell people how to deal with that.
Okay, so it is an extremely difficult situation, and it comes from two sides. I'll explain the second side with a situation that I've been dealing with recently now. But the normal situation is your tenant's residency permit, let's call it that, is going to expire in 10 months, but you want to sign them up for 12 months. The simple answer is you can't. You can only sign them up for 10 months. At the end of the 10 months, they can then go and do their renewal. And if they are renewed and they have a residency permit, yes, then you may sign them up for another 2 months or until that permit then comes to an end. I mean, like we know with the Zimbabwean exemption,
Yes,
the government keeps just moving this goalpost.
but
Every
they move
year
it
we
at the
get
last
to
minute.
Yes, we get to November, December, and they say, oh, we'll just add another 12 months onto it. But
Yes.
at the time when we are signing these leases, we suspect there's going to be this extension, but we don't know that there's going to be this extension, which means we are extremely limited. And often I've got landlords and I've got agents coming to me and saying, but these are good tenants. They pay on time, they are not disruptive, they maintain the place, they are good tenants. We like them, we want to hold on to them. In
Hmm.
a situation like that, the only practical solution, which is not a perfect solution, but it's the only practical one, is essentially to let the lease go month to month. Because if something happens and there is any sort of investigation on this, you have to then unfortunately give the tenant notice and say, time to go. But if they can, within a reasonable amount of time, get their residency permit to be extended, then you know, okay, we are secure, we can sign a lease for X amount of time. But again, this is something where there's a lot of management involved because you have to be sort of walking this process with the tenant. Have you done your application? Can you show us you've done the application? Where's the application now? What has happened now? Have you heard anything? Not just a case of, oh, yes, I'm sure you'll do it and, fire and forget. It doesn't really help. The other situation that I've been dealing with now is the tenant lives in a body corporate. The body corporate does not allow leases, and this is all in the rules, perfectly valid. I mean, no issue on this. But the clause says the body corporate does not allow leases less than 6 months. So this is one of those units that does not allow short-term letting. So leases must be 6 months. If the lease is not 6 months or more, the tenant cannot put their biometrics onto the system and they cannot have access through the front gate. But the tenant that's looking to move in only intends to be in the country for 4.5 months. Their visa is only for 4.5 months. And the rental is 85,000 Rand a month. So it's a lot of money. The landlord obviously wants to lease to this tenant because they know the tenant's good for the money and they're not going to find anyone else willing to pay this much over the summer period now, but they can't sign a 4.5 month lease because the body corporate doesn't allow. But they can't sign a 6 month lease because the visa doesn't allow. So now they've come to me and they said, what do we do? And I said, well, it's very simple. You sign a 6 month lease, you give that to the body corporate, you get the biometrics done, and then we do an addendum allowing the tenant to cancel after 4.5 months without penalty because we know he's getting on the plane. So there's no risk. So we found a
Okay.
solution because there is a solution because unfortunately this situation is not one being caused by either the tenant or the landlord. It's just the regulations and the long lines at Home Affairs that are creating ripples through the market. So we can and we will find a solution.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you to find a solution for Robin quickly. Who just said you when you advertise, sometimes it
Okay, let's
works.
see what we can do. Let's see what we can
I
do.
have tenants who have applied for the renewal permit but have not received it. Then what?
Okay. So the question is, Robin, you know your tenants. Are they up to date on rent? Are they good tenants? Does the landlord want to renew with them? Are you comfortable that they are going to maintain their payments and maintain their behavior and everything's going to be fine? If that's the case, let the lease go month to month. Because remember, the fact that their papers have expired or going to expire is not automatically terminating the lease. It's not being reported anyway. Yes, your landlord is supposed to cancel that lease. Your landlord is supposed to not sign a new lease with them. But allowing the lease to go onto a month-to-month basis is not something active. It's not you having signed a new lease with them. It's you having forgotten to do something, inverted commas. The lease has now gone on to a month to month. If the papers come through, you sign in. If the papers don't come through, you give them their month's notice. Your landlord is secure. So it's the stopgap solution that we have at this point.
You're making me now think when I talked about the breach, okay?
Hmm.
One of the terms of the lease agreement happens to be that you certify or whatever the hell you do, you acknowledge that you know
Hmm.
that you have to be legal in the country.
Yes.
Would it not maybe there be a good thing? And I don't want to go and update it there because a lot of people don't even work in this area. Would it not be a good thing there to maybe say, check the tenant's requirements or our risk management alternative, our low risk management alternative with a structured process,
Hmm.
that might be where you use that option, where you say, okay, they've applied. They think it's going to take 3 months. Why don't we put it on a month to month for now? And you explain to the landlord, have you checked your color chart? Is orange on it? If it's not on it, then I suggest we use this option. How do you feel about having a onesie? That sort of thing, especially in this weather, it's not nice. So, and then maybe say, okay, well, let's put them on a month to month and we'll review it in 3 months' time. And you say to them, listen, Yarki, as soon as you get that document, come see me and we can get it sorted. Is that not a way
Now,
to?
remember what we're doing here. If they don't have the document when they want to take occupation, red flag. Do not hand over the keys if they do
Yeah.
not have that visa. If they have the visa, the lease is for the period of the visa, no longer. It's if they're inside the lease, they're already there. Now the visa is ending and we're looking at renewals. We know they've done their application. We know they're good standing tenants. Then we allow the month to month. If there's any red flag, if your gut at any point says this might be a problem, walk away. Thank you, Mr. Tenant. You don't have papers. I can't extend with you. Be on your way. This is only for those tenants that we know are good, that we know are
Yes.
not looking to cheat the system. The system just doesn't work efficiently enough.
Mm,
We hold this for them
mm.
because yes, we can be heartless, but we don't have to be heartless if these people are not trouble.
Put them in a holding.
But if they don't have that residency permit when they want to take occupation, there is no month to month. There is no bring it to us in 3 months' time. No, do not give them occupation. We do not know them. We do not understand them. We do not have a relationship with them. They might be scamming the system, and first day they move in, they are trouble, and the next thing you know, you've got 17 cousins living in a 2-bedroom.
Yeah.
Stay away. I see Elise smirking there. She's heard the story a
We can't
thousand
make it
times.
that almost borders on xenophobia. So let's move on to the next point, isn't it? Because remember, this is pre-recorded live. I mean, this is recorded live. An inspection is a very good idea. I put it in here because, to be honest, I didn't go put it in the first step. But one can do an inspection and, based on that, make a recommendation to the landlord. Because let's be honest, I think everybody knows there are some people that are actually causing more damage to the property than what it's worth. And in that sort of situation, you want to say, Abel, now, ladies and gentlemen, if you do that, please be careful. I've had a situation, a man with green teeth, so the agents told me. And I think there was green all around the house as well. But anyhow, when they called me for a recommendation, I suggested that we can't recommend him. And you know what? He got stuck there. So please be careful how you give recommendations after that. I always suggest to people that they go to landlords who are not making use of an agent's services. That's what I do, because they're probably less likely to do the checks that I am duty bound to be able to answer honestly. So that's what I do. Sorry, private landlords, but that's what I do. So be careful. Help them move. I mean, not like Elise. I mean, Elise can help them move too, but just in a different way. Updated employment information. You know, this is something that we don't think of. And when you sit back and you're not in the business like you are, and you're sitting like me and we're daydreaming and we're looking at the scene there, and you think to yourself, but wait, I've got somebody who I last knew was employed at Toyota's 12 months ago. I'm now increasing the rent by 8%, 1,600 Rand a month, whatever it is I'm increasing it. I don't even know if they've still got a job there. Surely it's incumbent on me to protect and make sure that I'm not working for free. And I'm glad you said that earlier, Ishmael, that working for free thing, because that's one way to say to yourself, oh, shame, it's so sad, but do I want to work for free? You look at the mirror and say, Sean, do you want to work for free? Because that's in the end, that's what it comes down to. Working harder for nothing. But so updated employment, affordability assessment, refika, you really just need to know what's in your checklist. But some people have updated client questionnaires, target financial sanctions. You know, if you already said the name Matlala, but if your tenant surname is Matlala, then you might just want to double check the TFS or the adverse media, yeah? Because it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of them. But I just saw today in the news that evidently Menland Main, where they got the Wilburs bags, né? Where the Wilburs bags go up the lift and all that stuff, yeah, into Nedbank up the lift, né? I believe they've just cancelled the lease there because there's 300,000 Rand owing. So you don't want to be in that position, because that's evidently where Tshwane Health, Medicare, whatever it is. But it's on the news, it's not secret. Update credit report. That's you to make things easier, Robin. You can have those things like the monitoring that TPN, for example, does. Then you don't have to do it, because they'll warn you when something happens. Deposit top up, very important. I remember having a client where the rent was something like 8,000 a month and the deposit was 2,000 because they'd never increased the deposit. You know, I mean, the 2,000, that's 10 years ago, so you can imagine. And then we're saying to the landlord, in terms of Section 14, we must do all these things, blah, blah, blah. Can you please say we can go ahead, approve the renewal as proposed, and renew with alterations when they want to change the rental, etc., etc. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the pinnacle, the summit, where we're going to send out this thing we've been talking about the whole time. Robin, you don't have to go through this process. This process is really just a reminder. And I've put it like to cover all options. So I've given you 3 versions. The landlord chooses not to renew. the landlord chooses to renew on a month-to-month basis, and the landlord if the landlord chose to renew on a fixed term basis. So let's have a look at one of them. And so that's essentially now what I've done there. And I'm not going to show you the not renew because that's not an interesting one. I'm just going to go to this fixed term renewal. This is now when we're contacting the tenant. The letter serves, blah, 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 blah. The landlord is willing to offer you a month-to-month extension. I don't know why that says month-to-month. Of the lease. Actually, I think I'm going to, this is why I'm going to go fix this. One of them is supposed to say month-to-month. This is where it says month-to-month due to the following breaches. Now, this you might actually want to talk about for somebody who's waiting for their paperwork to come from Home Affairs. Of course, we don't call it a breach. We just say month-to-month and then you let us know as soon as you got your papers. But the important point I put here is when I'm making the offer to Ishmael, not to Ishmael, I'm not thinking I called Ishmael about this. When we are communicating with them, I'm saying this renewal is strictly conditional and only will be finalized once. We've checked your affordability, whatever it is. We've done the refika because the law says we have to. A renewal inspection, if you're going to do one, updated employment information, updated credit report, deposit top up, payment of the renewal fee. We can learn from the lawyers here. I don't print it out. I don't fill it in until the money in the bank, honey. Klar. That's how I used to work. I can't. The system blocks me. You just say that. You just say the system blocks me. I use that a lot. My system blocks me. Thinking of Robin's question earlier, sometimes I also say, I'll have to speak to the shareholders, which just means that I have a conversation with myself now. Then the renewal offer is not binding until all the conditions have been met and has been signed by all parties. Time sensitive deadline. It's incredibly important, and it's blah 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 blah. If you accept, we will immediately proceed. If you do not accept, or if the offer expires due to non-response, I put an expiry year to non-response because, and that's where we're going to go into our next checklist, which is the renewal one, which we'll do in January. That's where we're going to hop in there, and then we're going to say to them, hey, it's expiring next week. Hey, it's expiring tomorrow. Hey, it expired. We're going to contact you to arrange to come take some kikis for the next person who's going to replace you. And that's when people move. So we've got to do that quite early so that we can get things done. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I think covers most of what I didn't think I was going to take 2 hours, but then you never know. I talk so much. Yeah. What are your thoughts? What are your questions? Any input, any feedback? I made a note there about the month-to-month. I think I must review this again before I send it out. I'm going to go through it again tomorrow and figure out how do we work in this thing about the month-to-month option, because I know that the visa thing or the permit thing or whatever it is a big problem in many of the areas that people working.
John, can I just
Sean,
come in quickly on? Oh, sorry, Elise, go ahead.
No, Ishmael, it's not relevant. Well, on topic. Go for it first.
Okay. Just on what you have on the screen now with this letter, I like that we've got a expiry date on the extension, because remember, the 40 to 80-day letter goes out and it says the landlord is willing to renew. These will be the new terms. That's an offer being made to the tenant. If you want to stay, this is what you need to stay for. This is what it's all going to be about. If the tenant doesn't respond, and now the landlord's thinking, well, I made the offer and, I'm sure he'll accept it. And he doesn't actually accept it. Come the new month, then yes, you would be entitled to your escalation, because this is what you said. If you stay, you have to pay me 8% more, right? So that we could say is valid and we can claim the 8%. But we don't get the 12-month lease, because without a signed renewal, without that actual acceptance, your lease moves to a month-to-month, which means the tenant can now give you notice and walk out the door, no penalty. So without putting a actual expiry on the offer, we might run the risk that we never end up with that renewal. And come the renewal time, there's still uncertainty. The whole purpose of this is to create certainty, and we still have uncertainty. So by saying you need to sign by the 25th, failing which the offer is revoked and you need to leave. Perfect. If your tenant doesn't come forward, you still have time to write to the tenant again and say, you haven't accepted the offer, not a problem, thank you and goodbye. We have certainty at all times, which is what we want.
Because this one got a lot more technical and complicated than what I thought for a 40 to 80 business day letter, I decided to stop by the letter. But what then happens is we get our fork in the road, which takes us to the lease renewal checklist or the exit process checklist. And that's where we follow up with a tenant. Because coming back to what you just said, somebody puts out an offer, let's say at 90 days, the third month before the end of the lease, I put out an offer. I don't follow up on that because things happen. I mean,
As is.
sorry, I'm reading a question. So, as Robin mentioned, things happen and we forget. And then, and have we not faced this? The tenant calls you in the last month because they haven't accepted the offer, and the offer hasn't expired because you haven't put an expiry date and you haven't followed up. And that's what I'm going to do in the renewal part, is making sure we get the T's crossed and the I's dotted. Then we go, and the tenant calls a week before and says, "Hey, I'm packed. I'm ready to go. When you coming to check this place out, man? My truck has arrived." And is that not the exact situation where we've had clients end up in? And which created October 2023. That created this whole thing about us delving into this and trying to help avoid those situations, because then you have a situation where you've sent all this lovely stuff. Now the landlord thinks you're the next thing since sliced bread. Is that still a saying? I don't know, maybe since Woolies handbags now. But anyhow, so you're the best thing, and now you have to call them and say, "Hey, I got exciting news for you. The tenant's left." "Oh, but Sean, you did this." "Yeah, but you see, what I didn't know is that the law, the laws are funny now." And then you look like a fool. And then the land's going to say, "No, no, but we must hold them liable." I've seen this happen quite a few times. So what do agents often do? You can't hold the tenant liable, because this is where we had the 45-minute conversation that started this whole rejuvenation process. You can't hold them liable. So often, but the landlord rightfully says, "But wait, wait, wait. I paid you as an expert. You caused me a loss. Yeah, do you want to see us in court, or do you just want to give me the money quietly? I'll give you a discount for that." I mean, that's the end result. And what I did, I just wrote an article recently, which I know you and Elise reviewed. And what I figured out in there, let's say you're charging a 10% management fee, and let's say the monthly rent is 10,000 Rand. So the management fee is 1,000 Rand a month. So you earn 12,000 over the year. Now you make a boo-boo at the end, and you end up compensating the landlord for the month's rent, which is 10,000. You know that you worked that whole year for 2,000? Yeah, boy, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So we're talking big money here. So that's why I'm a bit funny about this.
Sean, while you're going through the questions and stuff, I just
Yes.
want to say to Robin, I think one thing that people have to do at this stage, because I do think if you go through your packs and all your lists and letters, it may feel overwhelming. But I do think that it is time that you really go and assess your business and see, where can I improve? What systems can I put in place to that you don't need six of yourself? I mean, you get systems that you can really just activate, and it does all the work for you. So I think people have to go sit down in this time period, sort of relax and say, okay, where am I falling short, or where do I get stuck? What systems are available for me to help me with my business management? I know there's a lot of with the finances and that type of stuff, but business management. And I know it is going to be an expense, and we're going to talk about the expense that people are mentioning now. But I do think that it is an expense that you need to employ, because firstly, then you will be able to charge proper. for your management. And I also think that's when you can deliver the level of services, because I have to say the majority of agents that I've dealt with, and they charging like 4% management or 3% management. There's systems, there's no systems. It's people that's overworked, they're barely coping, and they cannot deliver a proper fee. And that's why some agencies, they're charging 12% and they're doing very well because they can show it and they've got the things in place to back it.
Elise, I think it was last year when I was up in Joburg and we went to that fancy place where you were doing something, which we spoke about. That was just after I'd spoken to the man here in Cape Town, and he talked about a procurement and a management. It's two different service offerings. A renewal can also be, if you want to call it that way. So it's two different service offerings. And he was like, but wait, Sean, because he charges 8% for a procurement or something to that effect, 1 month's rent, and then a full management for 10% if you want him to carry on managing. And I mean, I was a bit shocked too. And I said, but how do you justify that? Don't you get, I mean, I was asking the question when I tell people to charge things, and he was like, yeah, but wait, Sean, when I vet somebody, I do the same job in the vetting, whether I am going to manage them or whether the landlord's going to manage them. So why should I give a discount? And remember, we did in Joburg, I asked at that place, and about half the room was doing it that way in any case. They were having it as two separate service offerings. Um, and that's the way that one looks at these things. Because if you think about it, if you're charging 8% for a procurement and you're not charging a procurement fee when you manage, you're only doing 10%, you know you're managing for 2%. That's really what it
Yeah.
comes down to. You are doing all that work for 2%. And sometimes one just has to sit back and think of things that way.
And Sean,
Um,
if it comes down to
yes.
the question, sorry, that I see that Trudy is asking, and almost Serena as well, and I would really, because I don't know the answer. I know it's very dangerous to ask a question if you don't know the answer. Um, but I mean, from a landlord side, I would anticipate, or I'm expecting that the agency would actually pay that cost for that, the renewal CPN or screening, or even the report to see what is the value of the rent. Because I mean, that's part of your expense that's why I'm paying my management fee every month. And if my management is part of does includes the renewal, that expenses with regards to the renewal on the screenings. I'm not talking about the documents or anything. I'm
No, I
talking in
understand.
your very beginning.
But the point is, I can actually just include it in the renewal fee because the renewal fee is getting charged by the tenant in this particular case. So I can actually just include it in there, Serena, to be honest with you. And if one wants to, uh, I think it's justified to charge a renewal fee. If we start looking at what we've just gone through, okay? If you just to get to the 40 to 80, I know this is not part of the renewal, Ismail, it's the build up to the main event. But if you think about all of these things, in the end, there is a lot of work that goes into the end process. And
Yeah.
but now we are showing the value.
So, Sean, I think where I'm specifically saying is even before you get to the renewal part, there where you said, listen, you give that report to your landlord saying, either yes, renew, this is the value of the rent, and the tenant, you've did a pre-screening on the tenant, you say, yes, consider it. That type of cost. If then you proceed with the renewal, you're going to recoup your money from the renewal. If you're not renewing, you're going to recoup it from your new placing. So I think that's, if I understand the mindset correctly, I think it's not something you can go there and then and say, can I please charge now for these two reports that I've drawn and to start even the 40 to 80-day process.
The end result is when you are showing value, generally people do not question your costs. And I go back to the Woolworths ShopRite situation. Nothing against ShopRite, by the way. I just never go there. I don't go to Woolworths either. But it's both of them are giving you food, but one is costing more. But people go there. There's a market for everything. And so if you are costing yourself or you're adding value, you are going to find clients who value the value. Oh, listen to me. Appreciate the value that you are adding. We all do that. People don't, I mean, people don't just ride Toyotas. People ride all sorts of cars there. They don't go to the shop and say, Oh, wait, I want the cheapest one, which people aren't like that. And if we differentiate ourselves from other people with these sorts of processes and service, then people don't start thinking of the cost. They're thinking of what they are getting out of this, the protection they are getting. Sean came up with a risk managed alternative, those sorts of things. And they can't do it themselves. They don't know how to do it themselves. And I think that's where you show it. Does that make sense?
And makes sense, Sean.
Yes, it does.
Um,
Sean, I am sorry, but I need to move on to some other things now. I do apologize that I have to leave before
you
we
don't need to
officially
apologize.
done,
Bye.
but
You don't need
yeah.
to apologize. Ishmael, thank you
Okay.
so
Thank you
much.
all very much. And
We
yeah,
may talk before the holidays if people have problems. But I know that
the
in
phone's never
in
off.
January, you and I
The
have
phone's
a
never off.
yes. No, I
Okay,
know your phone
and
is never off.
but I will see everybody in the new year. Thank you
Thank you
all
so much.
very much. And yeah, goodbye. Enjoy the
We're going to
holidays.
also wrap up soon.
Thank you.
Just
Thank
Okay.
you,
one
Ishmael.
Thanks.
sentence.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye.
Ishmael. So Robin says, can this paperwork renewal procedure be automated? Robin, you know what? It can all be automated. The problem is, I'll tell you why I haven't automated it, because everybody works differently. I give a framework, I give a template. But if you see, essentially what my process is doing, okay, is we're saying, if this, then that. That's really what we're doing. We're saying, um, if it's yes, we do this. And a lot of that can be at least semi-automated. For example, we were with We Connect You, and I get nothing out of We Connect You, so I'm not trying to market people. They have a place there for templates. So that's one of the reasons that my letters say something like L601A. So you go into the template, you type L601A, it pulls up the letter template that I've just shown you. Where it says property address, it automatically populates that. You scan through it and you alter it for this specific one and you press go. That's already part of an automation. So that makes things easier. You can then say, well, I'm not showing that system, but you can have something that says, remind me automatically in 3 days. I know my email system does something like remind me automatically in 3 days to follow up if I haven't heard back or something like that. So yes, all these things are possible. I've thought of doing it before, but people don't, strangely enough, a lot of people don't agree with me now. So people want to do things different, or they're like, no, Sean, you're just too dramatic and you're over the top. We want to change this or change that. And so for that reason, but yes, it is possible. It is possible to be able to automate some of them.
No,
Serena says
Sean.
that she's got all her renewal emails on templates with We Connect You. So, I mean, I'm just giving you an example. There's other ways to have templates. It doesn't have to be. I mean, when it's part of a system, it's nice. And I'm sure it's not the only system that does it. But I mean, in Outlook, you can, for example, even create templates. So, but the point is, you're right. Elise was talking about and Elise, about 2 years ago, I was talking to those document people, wasn't I, that I put you in touch with? And it's not DocuSign, ladies and gentlemen. I was talking to those people, and the whole idea there was that I would be able to upload all of these things, have them available in a soft format, and then and then we could sell that to people, and they could essentially fine tune it for themselves. It didn't make sense at that point because it was getting like to be a very complicated thing to allow for all the options. But yes, it is possible. Um, Maybe I must explore that again. Let me put it on. I'm not going to promise this time. I'm not going to promise. But one of the things I set myself a target this year was to try and automate things. Um, Automate process. I'm just going to put this down here. But I certainly think there is scope for that. I just can't tell you the answer. Yep. So Serena also says that her emails on Outlook and makes the work. Yeah. So there's those sorts of things where you can make it easier. But the end result is, we've been through this now. We've spoken for an hour and a half about a 40 to 80 business day letter. Because when you think of it, it seems very simple. But when you start saying, oh, but wait, what am I going to do? And then when I had this big issue about the breaches, Elise, because I was like, okay, we're going to do breaches, but it's no use me asking the landlord what they want. They say, oh, no, they want a fixed term renewal. Then I go back to them and say, oh, you know what? I actually just checked, and the tenant is in arrears. So, no, I don't think it's, you must look like a fool. So we've got to do it up front. Sorry, I'm busy plugging something in because it told me my battery was low. Not my personal one, although, yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, have I added some value today? Have I given you some ideas? Has Elise and Ishmael? I hope you've got some takeaways. I saw some mistakes in my documentation. I'm going to give me tomorrow to run through. I also wrote month to month, you would have seen at some point in time, because I think I'm going to make that note there to remind ourselves. Because, when you're busy, I know what it's like. You're trying to do something and then the phone's ringing and they call back again and then they tell you it's urgent, the tap's dripping, and you say, how long? They say for 3 months, but it's urgent now, no? It's urgent now because it's irritating me. But I will work on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope and trust between the three of us. Ishmael, I'm not saying you don't have nice ideas, Elian, but Ishmael thinks about things, and that's what I like. No, you also have good ideas. He should just book them more often. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
You owe me chocolates, Sean.
No, but that's why we invite you, because we have fun together. But you go through this, and as we go through training in the year, and I think, yes, no, I must update this, update this, update this. And I remember you contacting me about the thing about people renewing in a breach and the consequences it has. And it's taken me a long time to work that into the process properly, because I couldn't figure out, it seems so easy when you got it here. But you start here and then you're like, no, but where can I fit that in? Oh, I got to renumber everything. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. And you go round and round and round. But I hope and trust that, ladies and gentlemen, we put together something that really covers everything. You may decide not to do all of it, and that's absolutely fine. It's totally up to you. But I just want it to be there. So, I think things like the immigration thing, it's something that, I mean, my goodness, it's a common situation. So yes, so we've tried to make provision for all of those things. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's where we're going to wrap it up, unless anybody has any further questions.
Sean, I want to say from my side, thank you very much. I loved what you said this morning. I look forward to see all of your documents. I think it's such a value. And it's finally somebody that break it up in two. And thank you for an amazing session and an amazing year. We always love partnering with you, and we look forward
And
to
I love
partnering with
partnering
you
with you.
next year.
We've had so much fun. I even have a picture of me with a Moorse burger, because there was no other word for that one, eh? Elise took me to that place, and she there in Pretoria, nog on it, and she bought a burger that was bigger than my chest. High ball. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I also want to thank all of you for joining up, being with us, staying with us over the course of 2025. We will be joining it so that everybody you don't have to book me in the diary over Christmas. It'll be the second last week of January, where we will have our bump-up session. And by then, hopefully, I will be out of the holiday mood and I'll have got my next piece together, where we go into the renewal side. But yes, thank you, everybody. It's been nice. What happened to my key? Oh no, it's still there. Elise, thank you guys. It's been fun partnering. Yes, so everybody have a lekker holiday. Enjoy yourselves. Members, if you have a problem, like Ishmael, my WhatsApps are available, but only to members. But you're welcome to pop me a WhatsApp at any point in time. I will get back to you as soon as possible. And you heard Ishmael say on the recording that his phone will be on. And I must say, he always gets back to me when I need to consult him, because some things are way above my pay grade. But yes, other than that, enjoy your holidays. Elise, have fun. Enjoy your
Thank
holiday.
you.
And I suppose we can say bye for 2025. It sounds like a
Bye.
Christmas job.
Bye for
Bye.
Christmas.
Bye, everyone.